All right, a quick one this afternoon from the Philosophy for Philistines channel, where my inner honey badger has been awakened. We live in an age of appalling ignorance of things that should be well understood after all the attempts to use broken ideology have proven to be ruinous, murderous, tyrannizing, illiberal, authoritarian. I watched a program this morning, and it'll be posted below as anything that I'm quoting is, where Australia was being interviewed about its relationship with China and how everything is imploding under Xi's lust for control of global hegemony. So I'm going to begin by reminding us, not me stating it, it was Sir Winston Churchill that stated it from a speech that he gave in Perth, Scotland on the 28th of May, 1948. Socialism is the philosophy of failure, the creed of ignorance, and the gospel of envy. Envy drives everything that the socialist left does. It is a war on competence and freedom itself. Since Marxism involves state ownership and control of the means of production, and my critics claim to believe such systems result in greater distribution of economic prosperity to the worker, please tell me, where on earth such a system outperformed free market individual economic liberty as a means of equitable wealth distribution? The fact remains that centrally controlled economies and state ownership has repeatedly proven to be the least efficient and least effective means of production, wealth distribution, and means of economic prosperity that humanity has ever tried. It has in fact created nothing but tyranny, poverty, and starvation wherever and whenever total state control has been attempted, and it has the gulags and the graves to prove it. Why don't my detractors try informing themselves instead of coming onto my profile to hurl insults at me like uneducated, illiberal, ranting bumpkins? Their ignorance of the system they advocate indicates they are clearly without an argument to defend their own position. And therefore insulting others is the only means that they and other social collectivist bullies like them have left to use in an attempt to cow others into submission. As I stated, I could trade any one of them for any other fool who believes in such toxic socialist ideology to have the same stupid, uninformed, ideologically possessed conversation. And I post a video here by Dr. Jordan B. Peterson. Oh, that wasn't real communism. So my comments about the video that I'm encouraging you all to watch about this attack on free market, individual economic liberty, and the rule of law in Australia, and the freedom of the Australian people. Listen to how utterly Australians have given in to China's bullying. It astounds me how naive Australian leaders in government and industry have been by pursuing a relationship with the CCP, who have never hidden their real agenda to shift global hegemony in China's favor, much to the detriment of Western liberal democracy. Ignorance of Marxist dogma is appalling because there's no excuse for it. Yet many still claim to believe in it. Marx believed that a truly utopian society must be classless and stateless. It should be noted that Marx died well before any of his theories were put to the test. Marx's main idea was simple: free the lower class from poverty and give the poor a fighting chance. How he believed it should be accomplished, however, was another story. In order to liberate the lower class, Marx believed that the government would have to control all means of production, so that no one could outdo anyone else by making more money. Unfortunately, that proves to this day to be more difficult than he might have realized. And I'll stop there with this thought to interject. Anybody who believes such things hates humanity, hates human nature itself. Marx described three necessary phases toward achieving his idea of utopia. Phase 1, revolution must take place in order to overthrow the existing government. Marx emphasized the need for total destruction of the existing system in order to move to Phase 2. Phase 2, a dictator or elite leader or leaders must gain absolute control over the proletariat. During this phase, the new government exerts absolute control over the common citizen's personal choices, including his or her education, religion, employment, and even marriage. Collectivization of property and wealth must also take place. So there you see, it's based on thievery. The whole thing. Based on envy and thieving. Phase 3, achievement of utopia. This phase has never been attained because it requires that all non-communists be destroyed in order for the Communist Party to achieve supreme equality. In a Marxist utopia, everyone would happily share property and wealth, free from the restrictions that class-based systems require. Doesn't that sound like the Great Reset, and you'll own nothing and be happy? It is the identical thing. The government would control all means of production so that the one-class system would remain constant, with no possibility of any middle-class citizens rising back to the top. And that's why right now we see the global elite waging war against the middle class. You can see the full text of the manifesto at this website, which I include here. Central bank. Marx also detailed the 10 essential tenets of communism, namely central banking system, 1. 2. Government-controlled education. 3. Government-controlled labor. 4. Government-controlled ownership of transportation and communication vehicles. 5. Government ownership of agricultural means and factories. 6. Total abolition of private property. 7. Property right confiscation. 8. Heavy tax on everyone. 9. Elimination of rights of inheritance. And 10. Regional planning. There's not a single centrally controlled government, centrally planned system that has ever functioned better than free markets. Ever. You can't cite one example of such. And you can also cite, in direct proportion to how free people are, how prosperous that nation has become and how upwardly mobile its citizens are. In the communist society that Marx described, the government is supreme authority through its total control of lands and means of production. Because a government distributes land and property among the people, communist sets a standard of equality, both economically and socially, among his followers. Since Marxism involves state ownership and or state control of the means of production, and you claim to believe such systems result in greater and by you, I'm talking about my socialist detractors, and you claim that such systems result in greater distribution of economic prosperity to the worker, please tell me where on earth such a system outperformed free market individual economic liberty as a means of equitable wealth distribution. Where? I'm going to wait till the cows come home, because there isn't a single example in human history where it outperformed. The fact remains that centrally controlled economies and state ownership has repeatedly proven to be the least efficient and effective means of production humanity has ever tried. It has in fact created nothing but tyranny, poverty, and starvation wherever and whenever total state control has been attempted, and it has the gulags and graves to prove it. Why don't you try informing yourselves instead of coming onto my profile to hurl insults at me, you uneducated, illiberal, ranting bumpkins? Your ignorance of the system you advocate indicates you are without an argument to defend your own position, such that insulting others is the only means that you and other social collectivist bullies like you have to attempt to cow others into submission. As I stated, I could trade any one of you for any other fool who believes in this toxic ideology to have the identical, stupid, uninformed, ideologically possessed conversation. And just as an addendum,